Hey everybody, welcome to Woodness Goodness. I am Graham and thank you for the 4,000 plus subscribers we now have. Super jazzed about that. As you can see, we have a farmhouse table. I know it has been a long time, a whole month since I last made a project, but I have this cool looking table here that you guys can try and build yourselves. Very similar design as a lot of other ones online, but this one has a little bit of a flair to it. I stained the top and bottom a little bit differently, and I hand scraped it and I sanded it and I stained it and oiled it multiple times, and it gives this really rich, cool, classy surface of the table. So yeah, super solid. Very inexpensive to do, and there's multiple ways of doing it, and this is how I did it. So let's get after it.
All right, everybody, so first things first, you are going to need a nice space to do this in. It's going to be a rather large table, so make sure you got some room to do this in. You will need 5 2x4s, 4 2x8s, 1 2x12, and 2 4x4s to make this design. First things up, let's make the skirt or the top frame of this table. You'll need 2 90-inch pieces with both ends cut at 45 degrees and 2 pieces cut at 35 inches with both of those ends cut at 45 degrees. Then 1 small piece at 32 inches that stretches between the 2 90-inch pieces center in the frame. Pre-drill and screw these together. I put 2 screws staggered, 1 on each side, as you can see, which keeps everything tight and neat, and it's ample strength for this tabletop. Use a square, make sure everything's square, and make sure your centerpiece is nice and centered using a tape measure. Now let's make our legs. You need 4 pieces of 4x4 cut at 28 inches and 1/4, and then 6 inches from the top. Measure the width and depth of a 2x4, because those are going to be our leg stretchers that fit in there. Cut all those out like you're cutting cheese for a charcuterie board, and then repeat on all 4 or all the rest of the 3. Cut it all out best you can, and then clean up those cuts using a chisel and a hammer or whatever other tool you might enjoy using, because our 2x4s are going to have to fit snug in there, so just make sure it's nice and clean. I used a sanding wheel on my grinder to clean up the edges a little bit, which worked really well. Now we're going to cut our leg stretchers. We're going to need 2 pieces of those, and those are 32 inches. See how they fit in nice and tight? Beautiful. Pre-drill and put 2 screws in each. Repeat those steps on the second set of legs. Whew, they fit, beautiful. As soon as those legs are ready, screw those into the frame of the tabletop, putting at least 1 screw on each side of the 4x4. Then you're going to want to cut 1 last piece of 2x4 at 80 inches, and this will be the stretcher between the 2 sets of legs. Center that between the legs and between the 2x4, and then screw that in place. All right, now you have a beautifully strong and square table frame. Next up, we got to prepare the wood for the tabletop. I used a planer to plane all my wood down just to give it a square edge and a nice look. This is something you do not have to do, but I do recommend squaring off your wood. That way your seams and gaps on your tabletop are few and far between. Make sure your wood is lined up how you want it, and here you see I am using a pencil and a square to make little lines for my dowel jig, so my dowels will line up with the boards next to them. Again, you do not have to use dowel or glue. You can put your tabletop together as you like, but this works quite well. It does take a little more time, but it looks pretty awesome when it's done. So put the doweling in there, glue it all up, and you'll see here I clamped my first 3 pieces together. I let those dry a little bit, and then I clamped on the last 2 pieces to make everything a little bit easier, and I thought I made it a little more square this way. After everything dries and your tabletop is put together, it's time to beat this thing to smithereens and give it a bit of a nice farmhouse feel or rustic look. I used a steel pipe and then I used a paint scraper to hand scrape it. As you can see, I used a bit of a diagonal lines, as I saw in another video on YouTube of someone redoing pine floors. Now all my edges, I decided to take a circular saw and cut just a thin strip just to give it some texture, some curvature, and then I took my cabinet scraper and just rounded over the edges and roughed it up a bit. We're going for a nice rustic table here, folks. This is not perfect. We want it to look rough. Now, without sanding it at all, after roughing it up, I stained it with my darkest stain I was going to use on the table, which is espresso. That way the color would sink into all the deformities and defects that I made on the wood, and now I'm going to sand it to remove the top portion and smooth it out and really make those defects pop, which makes it look that much better. Then stain the bottom. That's the only stain or love the bottom of the table receives. And while that dries a little bit, let's go over to the table frame and sand that baby down. Alright, so I decided to go with a gray stain here. Again, color is totally up to you, but I thought graying with the darker brown might look kind of nice, and it certainly does. Always wipe up any excess stain. I don't use any stain or wood conditioner. I just go right for it, and it usually turns out pretty well. Alright, so now tabletop time. This is where the magic happens. Danish oil, baby. Love it. Look at that thing. Color popping. After that, I take sandpaper to it again. 220 grit. Look at even more characters starting to pop. Even more Danish oil. Just get it right in all the cracks and grooves. Look at the color. And now I'm taking some hand sandpaper, taking really good care of it right before I put a couple coats of polyurethane on it, which is a water-based polyurethane. Goes on really nice, dries really fast. And I decided to anchor my tabletop to the table frame using some angle iron, just drilling the holes. Super cheap by doing it this way. And really secured my table up nice to that frame. One last coat of polyurethane and boom! Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. If you don't like it, well, you better get your eyes checked, because this thing looks awesome. Nice and rough. It doesn't even look like Lowe's lumber, but it is. Look at those edges. Beautiful. Imagine turkey dinner on that thing. Yummy. Delicious. There's the table in its new home. Super jazzed. Super awesome. There you have it. Thanks everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will try and keep pumping out some cool projects for you. Thanks guys. See you later.